I'm giving the promotion to someone who actually deserves it, my manager said, tapping his pen like the sound itself was supposed to put me in my place. He didn't even look at me when he said it. His eyes stayed glued to the door, waiting, like a director cueing an entrance. And right on time, Talia stepped in, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk so smug it made my stomach twist. She didn't earn that smirk, or the job, or the praise. She earned something else, something I didn't know yet but would find out soon enough. Maybe next year, he added, waving his hand at me the same way people shoot flies. If you learn to be more useful. Useful. The word hit me harder than the demotion itself. I felt my throat tighten, my palms grow cold, my pulse spike so intensely I could hear it in my ears. And still, I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Inside, something sharp and controlled settled into place. I nodded once, calm, quiet, and stepped past them. Talia's perfume followed me out like the scent of victory she didn't earn. My chest was burning, but my mind was ice. This wasn't a disappointment. It was clear. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Alyssa Colford. I'm in my early 30s, and for 3 years, I have carried this department on my back. And apparently, I carried it so well that no one noticed when someone else climbed onto my shoulders. When I first started at Clearline Analytics, I was the kind of employee who believed good work always spoke for itself. I showed up early. I stayed late. I volunteered. I trained new hires. I documented everything. And for the longest time, I thought my manager, Derek Hollowford, noticed. He did, just not in the way I imagined. The first time he let Talia take credit for my analysis, I brushed it off. The second time, I swallowed it. The 10th time, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. But you can only ignore patterns for so long before they become undeniable. Still, even then, I didn't think he'd go this far. Not until I saw them exchange that silent, gleeful look in his office, the look that finally told me the truth. This wasn't favoritism. It was collusion. And I was done being quiet. I walked out of Derek's office holding my breath. The hallway felt like it stretched for miles. My hands were shaking so badly I had to shove them into my jacket pockets. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, that constant hum that normally faded into background noise but now felt like it was screaming at me. I forced myself to walk normally, one foot in front of the other, past the conference room where I'd presented my quarterly analysis last month, past the break room where I'd trained Talia on our systems 6 months ago, past coworkers who didn't look up from their screens because they had no idea what just happened. When I reached the bathroom, I pushed through the door and locked myself in the furthest stall. My breathing was shallow and fast. I pressed my palms against the cold metal walls and tried to steady myself. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, 3 years of fixing other people's mistakes, 3 years of being the person everyone came to when something broke. And this was how it ended, with Derek's dismissive wave and Talia's victory smirk. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers. I needed to check something. I needed to see if this was real or if I'd somehow misunderstood. I opened my corporate email. The screen is loaded. And I froze. There it was, top of my inbox. Subject line, "Congratulations to our Q4 star performer." I clicked it open. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Please join us in congratulating Talia, merchant, for her outstanding work on the client retention analysis project. Her innovative approach resulted in a 15% increase in quarterly renewals. This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership we value at Clearline. My project, my analysis, my 15% increase. I had spent 2 months on that project. 2 months of late nights pulling data, building models, testing variables. I had presented it to Derek 3 weeks ago with a full deck and documentation. He'd called it promising and said he wanted to elevate it to leadership. I thought that meant he was going to present it with my name attached. I scrolled down. The email was from our VP of Operations. It had been sent to the entire department. 43 people saw this. 43 people now believed Talia had done my work. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were perfectly still. But something cold was spreading through my chest, something that felt like ice water in my veins. I scrolled further. There was a forwarded thread attached at the bottom. I clicked it, and that's when I saw it. Derek's email to leadership from 2 weeks ago. Talia has been leading the retention analysis initiative. Alyssa provided some minor data entry support, but contributed nothing to the strategic direction. Nothing. I sat there staring at those words until they blurred. Minor data entry support. I had built the entire framework. I had identified the problem, proposed the solution, executed the analysis, and delivered the results. And he called it data entry. I closed my eyes and pressed the phone against my forehead. My breath came out in a shaky exhale. For a moment, I thought I might cry. The pressure was building behind my eyes, that hot sting that comes right before tears. But then something else happened. The sadness hardened. It crystallized into something sharper, something colder. I felt it settle into my chest like a stone dropping into still water. I wasn't going to cry. Not here, not over this. I stood up, flushed the toilet for effect, and walked to the sink. I washed my hands slowly, methodically. In the mirror, my face looked pale but composed. My eyes were dry. I walked back to my desk and sat down. My computer was still logged in. The screen showed my open project folders, my spreadsheets, my notes. I opened a new document, titled it Timeline, and I started to write. Every project, every analysis, every presentation, every late night, every email where Derek had praised my work privately but credited someone else publicly. I didn't realize I was building a pattern until I saw it all laid out in front of me. This wasn't the first time. It was just the biggest. The timeline grew longer the more I dug. I went back through my sent emails, my calendar, and my project logs. I cross-referenced dates with the company newsletter, with leadership announcements, with performance reviews. A picture formed. It was ugly and precise. January, I'd rebuilt our client database architecture. Derek presented it as department initiative led by Talia. March, I'd created a new reporting template that saved the team 8 hours a week. Newsletter credit, Talia Merchants Efficiency Innovation. June, I'd identified a billing error that would have cost the company $50,000. The fix was attributed to Talia's attention to detail. August, I'd trained 3 new hires and created the onboarding manual. Derek told leadership, Talia has really stepped up as a team mentor. And now, November. My retention analysis, my biggest project of the year, the one that was supposed to guarantee my promotion, given entirely to Talia. Every single major success I had produced had been rerouted. Everyone had Derek's fingerprints on it. Everyone had ended up attached to Talia's name. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My timeline now had 15 entries. 15 times my work had been stolen. But then I noticed something else. Something in the metadata of one of the shared files. A revision history that didn't match the story Derek had told. I clicked deeper, and I found something that made my pulse spike. The file was called Client Billing Override Q3. I remembered it. It was part of the database cleanup I'd done in July. I'd noticed some manual overrides that looked suspicious, amounts that had been adjusted without proper authorization codes. I'd flagged it to Derek at the time. He told me to leave it alone, it's already been handled. But now, looking at the file history, I could see who had made those overrides. Derek. He'd adjusted client billing amounts manually. Small amounts, 200 here, 500 there. Spread across enough accounts that it wouldn't trigger automatic alerts. But added together over 3 months, it was over $15,000. All overrides traced back to his administrator account. This wasn't just credit theft anymore. This was financial misconduct, possibly fraud. I felt my breathing speed up. My hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. If I reported this now, what would happen? Derek would spin it. He'd say I was a disgruntled employee who didn't get a promotion. He'd say I was fabricating evidence. He'd probably say Talia had discovered the discrepancies and I was trying to cover my tracks by blaming him. And people would believe him, because he was the manager, because he'd spent months building a narrative where I was the support player and Talia was the star. I needed more than this. I needed something he couldn't twist. I closed the file, saved my timeline, and shut down my computer. I was going to play the long game. That night, I sat in my apartment with cold takeout on the coffee table and my laptop open. I'd been staring at my timeline document for an hour, adding notes, cross-referencing dates, building connections. I felt exhausted, not physically tired, but emotionally drained, like someone had pulled a plug and let everything inside me drain out. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made every small sound feel amplified. But I wasn't sad, not anymore. The sadness had burned away, leaving something harder behind. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to march into Derek's office tomorrow and scream at him. I wasn't going to send angry emails or make accusations I couldn't prove completely. I was going to dismantle him, slowly, carefully, with the same precision I'd used to build every analysis he'd ever stolen from me. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. An email notification from Derek, sent at 9:47 p.m. Subject line, feedback. I picked up the phone, my heart rate ticking up slightly. I opened the email, and I felt that cold resolve settled even deeper. He'd just made his first mistake. The email was 3 paragraphs long. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding the tone. Alyssa, I wanted to follow up on our conversation today. I've noticed some concerning patterns in your recent behavior that I think we need to address. You seem resistant to collaboration and often work in isolation rather than supporting the team's collective success. This kind of attitude doesn't align with our department culture. Additionally, several colleagues have mentioned that your tone in meetings can come across as dismissive or condescending. I know you don't intend this, but perception matters. Moving forward, I need you to be more conscious of how you communicate and more willing to be a team player. I'm happy to discuss this further if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one. I want to help you grow, but I need to see effort on your end. I stared at the screen. My pulse was pounding in my ears. He was building a paper trail, creating a narrative, documenting attitude problems and collaboration issues so that when I didn't get the promotion, there would be a record justifying it. And if I pushed back, if I complained, he'd point to this email and say, "See, this is exactly the defensiveness I was talking about." It was textbook managerial gaslighting. I could feel the anger rising, hot and sharp. For a moment, I wanted to type back something cutting, something that would make him feel as small as he'd made me feel. But then I stopped, and I smiled, because he'd just given me exactly what I needed. I opened a new email. I took my time. I wrote carefully, deliberately, revising each sentence until it was perfect. "Hi, Derek. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate you taking the time to share your observations. I want to make sure I understand correctly so I can address these concerns. You mentioned resistance to collaboration. Could you provide specific examples? I've worked closely with the team on the client retention project, the billing database overhaul, and the Q3 reporting updates. I've also led training sessions for new hires and created documentation to support team workflows. Regarding tone in meetings, I'd be grateful for context. Which meetings and which comments specifically came across as dismissive? I want to make sure I'm communicating effectively, and concrete examples would help me improve. I've attached a summary of my project contributions from the past 6 months, along with the relevant email, threads, and timelines. I think this might help clarify my level of team involvement. I'm committed to supporting the department's success and would welcome a chance to discuss this further. Best, Alyssa." I attached everything: my timeline, email receipts showing my work, project files with my name in the metadata, meeting notes where I'd presented analysis that later appeared under Talia's name. I didn't accuse him of anything. I didn't sound angry. I just presented facts. Calmly, professionally. I hit send. Then I waited. 3 minutes later, my calendar pinged. A meeting invitation from Derek. Title: Urgent Performance Discussion. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Conference Room B. He'd taken the bait. I arrived at the conference room 5 minutes early. Derek was already there, sitting at the head of the table with his laptop open. Talia sat in the corner, scrolling through her phone with an expression that looked like boredom mixed with amusement. She wasn't supposed to be here. This was supposed to be a private meeting. But of course she was here. They wanted an audience, or maybe a witness to whatever story they were about to tell. "Alyssa, thanks for coming," Derek said without looking up. His tone was clipped, professional, but there was an edge underneath it. I sat down across from him and folded my hands on the table. I didn't say anything. Derek cleared his throat. "I want to address the email you sent last night. I appreciate your willingness to engage, but I have to be honest." The tone felt somewhat defensive. "I asked for clarification," I said evenly. "I want to understand the feedback so I can improve." "Right," he said, finally looking at me. "But the way you asked felt like you were challenging my assessment. That's part of the problem. You don't seem open to growth." Talia shifted in her chair. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to react. I didn't. Derek continued. "I've been tracking your performance for months, and frankly, you're not pulling your weight. Talia has been carrying a lot of the strategic workload while you've been focused on technical tasks." I let him talk, let him dig. When he finally paused, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "Documentation," I said. Derek opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His jaw tightened. Inside were printed copies of everything I'd attached to my email last night, but I'd added more. Project files with timestamps, email threads showing my work, analysis documents with my name in the file properties, meeting minutes where I'd presented ideas that later appeared in Talia's reports. I'd also included something else, a comparison chart. On one side, my documented contributions. On the other, the credit given in department announcements. The pattern was undeniable. Talia had stopped scrolling through her phone. She was staring at the folder now, her expression frozen. "This shows my project involvement over the past 6 months," I said calmly. "It also shows a discrepancy between the work I completed and the credit distributed in leadership communications. I'm not making accusations. I just want to make sure my contributions are accurately represented going forward." Derek's face had gone pale. He flipped through the pages, his movements jerky. "I don't think," he started. "I've also been asked to present my next project directly to leadership," I continued, my voice steady. "VP Reynolds reached out yesterday. She wants a detailed briefing on the client retention methodology I developed. She said she was impressed by the results and wanted to understand the framework better." That was a lie, but it was a lie he couldn't check without exposing himself. Derek's eyes snapped up to meet mine. Talia's smile had completely disappeared. The power in the room had shifted. Derek closed the folder slowly. His hand was shaking slightly. He tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said. His voice had lost its sharp edge. Now it sounded uncertain. "I've always valued your work, Alyssa. If there's been a miscommunication about credit, we can absolutely address that." Talia shifted in her seat, crossing her arms. She wouldn't look at me now. "I appreciate that," I said. I kept my tone neutral, polite. "I'm glad we're on the same page. I just want to make sure my contributions are visible, especially as we move into performance review season." Derek nodded too quickly. "Of course, absolutely. We'll make sure everything is properly documented." "Great," I said. I stood up, collecting my copy of the folder. "I'll send you the analysis VP Reynolds requested by the end of week. Let me know if you need anything else." I walked out before either of them could respond. Behind me, I heard Derek's chair scrape against the floor. I heard Talia's voice, low and urgent. What just happened? I didn't turn around. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. They'd just realized I wasn't an easy target anymore. And they were scared. That night, my phone buzzed at 11:34 p.m. Another email from Derek. Subject line, alignment. I opened it. Alyssa, I think we got off on the wrong foot this morning. I want to make sure we're aligned moving forward. Can we schedule some time to discuss team priorities? I stared at the message. He was panicking. I didn't reply. I let the email sit unanswered for 2 days. No response, no acknowledgement, just silence. And that silence did more damage than any reply I could have written. On Thursday morning, I came into the office to find 3 emails in my inbox from leadership, all sent directly to me, bypassing Derek completely. The first was from VP Reynolds. Alyssa, I'd like to schedule time next week to discuss your retention analysis approach. Can you walk me through your methodology? The second was from the Director of Operations. Following up on the billing database project, can you provide documentation on the architecture changes you implemented? We're considering rolling this out to other departments. The third was from HR. Performance review season is approaching. Please submit your self-assessment and project summary by the end of month. I read them carefully. Then I forwarded all 3 to Derek with a simple note. FYI, following up on these requests. Let me know if you need copies of anything. 12 minutes later, Derek appeared at my desk. His face was flushed. His tie was loosened. Can we talk? He said. His voice was tight. Sure, I said. Conference room. My office. We walked in silence. When we got to his office, he closed the door and turned to face me. What are you doing? He asked. I blinked. I'm responding to leadership requests. Isn't that what you wanted? More visibility. His jaw clenched. You're going around me. I'm responding to emails sent to me, I said calmly. If leadership wants direct communication, I'm not going to ignore them. He stared at me. I could see the panic in his eyes now, barely controlled. He'd built his authority on controlling information, on being the gatekeeper between his team and leadership. And I just walked past the gate. Over the next week, the dynamic in the office shifted in ways that were subtle but undeniable. Derek and Talia started avoiding me. When I walked into the break room, their conversations stopped. When I passed Derek's office, the door was closed more often than not. I heard whispers, saw quick glances, felt the weight of their panic hanging in the air. But I didn't engage. I didn't confront them. I just kept working, quietly, methodically. I responded to leadership emails with detailed, professional summaries. I documented everything I sent. I kept copies of every exchange. And I watched them scramble. On Wednesday afternoon, I was walking past the copy room when I heard voices inside. Low, urgent. I slowed down. We need to get ahead of this, Derek was saying. His voice was strained. If they start digging into project files. What do you want me to do? That was Talia. She sounded scared. I can't just. You need to be ready to answer questions. If they ask about the retention project, you say we collaborated. Equally, you don't mention. I know, Talia snapped. But what if they check the files? What if they see? They won't, Derek said, but he didn't sound convinced. Not unless someone gives them a reason to look. I kept walking. I didn't need to hear more. Because I already knew what they were panicking about. The audit. The company-wide audit that was about to uncover everything. The announcement came Friday morning, an email to all staff from the CFO. As part of our annual compliance review, we will be conducting a comprehensive audit of all department data logs, project approvals, and system access histories. This is standard procedure and applies to all teams. Please ensure your documentation is up to date. The audit team will be reaching out to department managers over the next 2 weeks. I read the email twice, then I looked up. Across the office, I could see Derek's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face the color of old paper. Talia was standing near the printer, frozen mid-step. The audit wasn't because of me. It was routine, annual, but the timing was perfect. Because an audit would pull everything, every file edit, every approval, every unauthorized change, including the billing overrides I'd found weeks ago. I looked back at my screen and continued typing. My heart was beating steadily, calmly. I didn't need to do anything else. The system would do the work for me now. All I had to do was wait and answer questions honestly when they come. The audit team started their work on Monday. They set up in conference room A with stacks of printouts, laptops, and serious expressions. The office felt tense. People whispered near the coffee machine. Managers walked around looking stiff and rehearsed. Derek looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red-rimmed. He kept checking his phone, then putting it down, then checking it again. Talia had called in sick. I worked quietly at my desk, responding to emails, finishing reports. I didn't look stressed because I wasn't. My files were clean. My work was documented. I had nothing to hide. On Tuesday afternoon, I got a calendar invitation. Audit team meeting, Alyssa Colford 2:00 p.m., conference room A. I accepted the invitation. At 2:00, I walked into the conference room. 2 auditors were sitting at the table, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a younger man with a tablet. "Ms. Colford, thank you for meeting with us," the woman said. "I'm Karen Mitchells and this is David Chen. We're reviewing project documentation for your department and we have some questions." "Of course," I said. I sat down and folded my hands on the table. "We've been going through file access logs and project attribution records," Karen said. "There are some discrepancies we'd like to clarify." I nodded. "I'm happy to help." Karen opened a folder. "Can you walk us through your involvement in the Q4 client retention analysis?" I took a breath, and I told them everything. I spoke for 20 minutes. I was careful, precise. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't accuse. I just presented facts. "I developed the retention analysis framework in September," I said. "I built the data models, ran the projections, and compiled the final report. I presented it to Derek on October 8th. He said he wanted to elevate it to leadership." I pulled out my laptop and opened the project files. "Here's the original file with timestamps. You can see my name in the metadata. And here's the email chain where I submitted the draft to Derek." David made notes on his tablet. Karen leaned forward, studying the screen. "And the credit for this project was given to Talia Merchant?" Karen asked. "Yes," I said. "The announcement went out on October 25th. Did you raise any concerns at the time?" "No," I said honestly. "I wasn't sure how to address it. I assumed there was a miscommunication." Karen nodded slowly. "Were there other projects where you experienced similar discrepancies?" I hesitated for just a moment. Then I pulled out my timeline document. "Yes," I said. "I started tracking patterns a few weeks ago. I have documentation for 15 projects over the past 10 months where my contributions were either minimized or attributed to someone else." I slid the document across the table. Karen and David exchanged a look. "Do you have supporting documentation for these?" David asked. "Yes," I said. "File histories, email threads, meeting notes, version logs." Karen's expression tightened. "Can you send us everything you have?" "Of course." They asked a few more questions. I answered each one calmly, professionally. Finally, Karen closed her folder. "Thank you, Ms. Colford," she said. "This has been very helpful. We may follow up if we need anything else." I nodded and stood up. As I reached the door, Karen said, "One more thing." I turned. "You mentioned you flagged some billing discrepancies back in July. Can you elaborate on that?" I felt my pulse tick up slightly, but my voice stayed steady. "Yes," I said. "I'll send you the file." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I pulled up every file, every email, every piece of documentation I'd collected over the past month. The client retention analysis, the billing database project, the reporting templates, the training materials, the onboarding manual, and the billing overrides. I organized everything into folders, labeled them clearly, added timestamps and descriptions. Then I drafted an email to Karen Mitchells. Hi, Karen. As requested, I've attached documentation related to the projects we discussed today. I've included file histories, email threads, and version logs for each item on the timeline. I've also attached the billing discrepancy file I mentioned. In July, I noticed several manual overrides in the client billing system that appeared to bypass standard approval protocols. I flagged this to my manager at the time, but was told it had been handled. The file contains the override log with account details and authorization codes. Please let me know if you need any additional information. Best, Alyssa. I attached everything, 32 files, months of evidence. I read the email one more time. Then I hit send. I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair. My hands were shaking slightly now, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the weight of what I'd just done. I hadn't just documented credit theft anymore. I'd handed them evidence of fraud. And there was no taking it back. Friday morning, the office felt different. The air was heavier. Conversations were quieter. I arrived at my desk to find Derek already in his office with the door closed. Through the glass wall, I could see him talking on the phone. His face was red. His gestures were sharp and defensive. At 10:00 a.m., an email went out to the department. Due to restructuring needs, Derek Hollowford has been temporarily reassigned from his current projects. Mark Stevens will be serving as interim department lead until further notice. Please direct all project-related questions to Mark moving forward. I read the email twice. Reassigned, not fired, not suspended, just removed from projects. But in corporate language, that was the first crack in the foundation. Derek didn't leave his office all morning. People walked past his door but didn't knock. His calendar had been cleared. At 2:00 p.m., Talia came back to the office. She looked pale and tired. She walked straight to her desk without making eye contact with anyone. At 3:15 p.m., she got a calendar invitation. I saw it because our calendars were still shared in the department system. The meeting was titled, HR Discussion, Talia Merchant 4:00 p.m. She stared at her screen for a long moment. Then she stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked toward the elevators. She didn't come back. Monday morning, the whispers started. People had noticed Talia's extended absence. They'd noticed Derek's closed door and cleared the calendar. At 9:30 a.m., HR sent out another announcement. Talia Merchant's promotion to senior analyst has been placed on hold pending internal review. We will provide updates as appropriate. I read the message and felt something shift in my chest. Not exactly, more like vindication. For months, I'd been invisible. My work had been erased. My contributions had been stolen. And now, finally, people are starting to see the truth. At 11:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Conference room C now. Derek. I stared at the message. My first instinct was to ignore it, but then I thought better of it. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I walked to conference room C. The door was closed. I pushed it open. Derek was standing near the window, arms crossed. He turned when I entered. His face was a mess of emotions, anger, fear, desperation. Close the door, he said. I closed it but stayed near the exit. What do you want? I asked. I want to know what you told them, he said. His voice was tight, controlled, but barely. I told them the truth, I said simply. The truth, he repeated. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. You sabotaged me. You went to audit with a vendetta. I answered their questions, I said. That's not sabotage, that's compliance. His jaw clenched. You know what you did. You fed them lies. You twisted everything to make me look. I gave them documentation, I interrupted. Timestamps, file logs, emails, all of it verifiable. If that makes you look bad, that's not my fault. He stared at me. His hands were shaking. Please, he said suddenly, his voice cracked. I have a family, I have a mortgage. If this goes further, I'm finished. I looked at him. For a moment, I almost felt something. Pity, maybe, or sympathy. But then I remembered his dismissive wave in his office. His smug expression when he said Talia deserved the promotion. His email accused me of attitude problems. You should have thought about that, I said quietly, before you stole my work. Derek's face went from desperate to angry in seconds. You're making a mistake, he said. His voice was low, threatening. You think you've won? You've just made yourself a target. No one likes a snitch. I didn't flinch. I didn't snitch. I documented. There's a difference. You ruined my career. You ruined your own career, I said. I just held up the mirror. He took a step toward me, not close enough to be physically threatening, but close enough to invade my space. I could make things very difficult for you. I looked him in the eye. My voice was calm, steady. I document everything. The words landed like a physical blow. His face went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because he understood what that meant. It meant every conversation we'd ever had was backed up. Every email was saved. Every meeting was logged. It meant if he came after me, I had evidence. Mountains of it. He took a step back. His shoulders sagged. You've already made things difficult for yourself, I said quietly. I didn't do that. You did. I turned and walked out of the conference room. Behind me, I heard him slam his hand against the table. I kept walking. The HR interviews started that afternoon. I watched through the glass walls as people were called into conference room a one by one. 10-minute conversations. 20 minutes. Some came out looking confused. Others looked uncomfortable. By Wednesday, the entire department had been interviewed. On Thursday morning, the company-wide email arrived. Subject line, Department Update. I opened it with my coffee cooling on my desk. Effective immediately, the following organizational changes will take place. Derek Hollowford has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into policy violations. Talia Merchant's employment has been terminated effective today. Mark Stevens will continue as interim department lead. The office went silent. You could hear the hum of computers, the buzz of fluorescent lights, the sound of someone's phone vibrating on a desk. I stared at the screen. Read it again. Administrative leave. Terminated. It was over, or at least the first phase was over. I looked across the office. Derek's desk had already been cleared. His nameplate was gone. His monitor was dark. Talia's desk was empty too. Someone from HR had packed her belongings into a box that morning. I watched them carry it out at 8:45 a.m. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. Justice had been served, quietly, methodically. Not with explosions or confrontations. With documentation. The next morning, I received another email, this one from VP Reynolds. Alyssa, leadership has completed a review of the recent audit findings. We want to schedule a meeting to discuss next steps and your role moving forward. Are you available Monday at 10:00 a.m.? I read the email 3 times. My heart was beating faster now. Next steps, my role moving forward. I replied, yes, I'm available, thank you. The weekend passed slowly. I tried to distract myself with errands, with reading, with anything that would keep my mind from spinning through possibilities. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully, professional but confident. At 9:55 a.m., I walked to the executive floor and checked in with the receptionist. They're ready for you, she said, gesturing toward the conference room. I walked in. VP Reynolds was there. So was the director of operations and the head of HR. 3 people, 3 serious expressions. My stomach tightened. Alyssa, thank you for coming, Reynolds said. She gestured to a chair. Please sit. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap to keep them steady. Reynolds opened a folder. We've completed the audit review. The findings were significant. We discovered systemic issues with project attribution, credit assignment, and financial authorization protocols. Issues that went back over a year. I nodded but didn't speak. Your documentation was instrumental in uncovering these problems, she continued. You provided clear, verifiable evidence that allowed us to identify patterns we wouldn't have caught otherwise. The director of operations leaned forward. We also reviewed your project contributions over the past 3 years. Your work has been exceptional, consistently, and it's clear you weren't receiving appropriate recognition. My throat felt tight. We want to correct that, Reynolds said. Reynolds slid a document across the table. I looked down at it. Job offer, Senior Data Analyst, Strategic Operations. I blinked. Read it again. This is a newly created position, Reynolds explained. It reports directly to the Director of Operations, not to department management. It's a leadership role focused on high-level analysis and strategic planning. The kind of work you've already been doing, but with proper authority and recognition. I stared at the paper, the title, the salary 30% higher than my current pay. We're also addressing the structural issues that allowed this situation to happen, the HR director added. We're implementing new oversight protocols for project attribution and credit assignment, and we're conducting management training on proper team leadership. This is effective immediately, Reynolds said, if you accept. I looked up at her. My mind was spinning. A month ago, I'd been told I wasn't good enough for a promotion, that I wasn't useful, that I should be more of a team player. And now, I was being offered a position higher than the one I'd originally wanted. I accept, I said. My voice was steady. Reynolds smiled. Good, we're glad to have you in this role, Alyssa. You've earned it. We shook hands, signed papers, discussed start dates and transition plans. When I walked out of that conference room 40 minutes later, I felt like I was floating. Not just because of the promotion, but because of what it represented. I hadn't won by being loud. I hadn't won by being aggressive. I'd won by being precise, patient, strategic. I'd won by documenting everything. I spent the rest of Monday in meetings with the Director of Operations, discussing my new role, my projects, and my team. By the time I left the building, it was after 6 p.m. The office was mostly empty. The lights were dimmed. I walked back to my old desk to collect my things. My nameplate was still there. My files were still organized the way I'd left them. But everything felt different now. I packed my personal items into a box, my coffee mug, my notebooks, and a photo of my dog. It didn't take long. I'd never decorated much, never felt permanent enough to make the space my own. Now I was moving to the executive floor, to an office with windows and a door that closed. I picked up the box and took one last look at my desk. 3 years I'd sat here. 3 years I'd worked late, fixed problems, trained people, built things that mattered. And for most of that time, I'd been invisible. But not anymore. I turned off my desk lamp and walked toward the elevator. As I passed the now empty manager's office, I paused. The glass walls were bare. The desk was cleared. The whiteboard had been wiped clean. Derek was gone. Talia was gone. The people who'd stolen my work, who'd gaslit me, who'd made me feel small, they were gone. And I was still here. Stronger, recognized, free. I pressed the elevator button and waited. When the doors opened, I stepped inside. And I didn't look back. 3 weeks later, I sat in my new office reviewing project proposals. The space was quiet, bright, filled with natural light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. My new title was printed on the nameplate outside my door. My name was listed on the department directory. My projects were presented directly to executive leadership. I wasn't invisible anymore. People respected my work now because they knew it was mine. Not because someone else had claimed it. Not because a manager had filtered it through their narrative. Mine. I thought about Derek sometimes, about where he'd ended up after the investigation concluded. I'd heard through office gossip that he'd been terminated after the administrative leave period ended. The billing irregularities had been more extensive than anyone realized. I thought about Talia too, about how quickly her perfect trajectory had crumbled once the foundation of lies was exposed. But I didn't think about them often. They were footnotes now, characters in a story I'd already finished writing. My phone buzzed, an email from VP Reynolds. Excellent work on the Q1 analysis. Leadership is very impressive. Let's discuss expansion into other departments. I smiled and typed back a response. Then I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the city below. Some people destroy themselves. You just have to hold up the mirror. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's a success. What would you do in this situation? Have you ever had someone take credit for your work? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. We share stories about standing up for yourself, finding your voice, and getting the recognition you deserve. And don't forget to like this video. It helps more people find these stories. Remember, document everything. Stay calm, and never let anyone make you invisible.